The alarm screamed through the halls of New Geneva Station like a wounded animal. Admiral Kane had been sleeping when it started, but now he ran through the corridors in his uniform, still buttoning his jacket. The emergency lights painted everything red, and people moved with the quick steps of those who knew something terrible was happening. In the command center, dozens of officers worked at glowing screens. The main display showed a map of human space with 17 star systems connected by dotted lines. 3 of those systems now flashed angry red. "Report," Kane said to the nearest officer. Lieutenant Torres looked up from her station. Her face was pale. "Sir, we lost contact with Titan's Rest 4 hours ago. Then New Shanghai went dark. Now we're getting distress signals from the Kepler colony." Kane felt his stomach drop. 3 colonies in one day. That had never happened before, not even during the worst pirate raids. "What kind of distress signals?" "They're screaming about ships, sir. Massive alien vessels." The transmissions cut off mid-sentence. The Admiral moved to the main screen and studied the red dots. They formed a line pointing straight toward Earth. Whatever was attacking them was moving fast and with purpose. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Reed's patrol ship. He's in the Titan's Rest system. Put it through." The speakers crackled with static. Then a man's voice came through, shaking with fear. "Command, this is Captain Reed. The colonies are gone. All of them. The orbital stations, the cities, everything, these ships, ... They're the size of cities. Themselves, they have weapons that tear apart matter. My sensors can't even understand how they work." Kane grabbed the microphone. "Captain, what about survivors?" "There are some escape pods, but not many." "Sir, these aliens don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just destroy everything and move on. I've never seen anything like it." The transmission ended in static. Kane stared at the red dots on the screen, his mind racing. In his 30 years of service, he had fought pirates, rebels, and even other human colonies during the unification wars, but this was different. This was an enemy that could destroy entire worlds. "Sir," Torres said quietly, "we're getting reports from the outer colonies. People are panicking. They want to know what's happening." Kane turned to face his staff. These were good people, trained officers who had served with him for years. He saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear he felt in his own chest. "Get me President Walsh on the secure line," he ordered. "And send word to all fleet commanders. I want every ship we have moving to defensive positions." While he waited for the connection, Kane studied the tactical display. Humanity had spread across 17 star systems over the past 2 centuries. Each world had millions of people, cities, families. The thought of losing them all made his hands shake. The president's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, older than her 50 years. "Admiral, I've been getting reports." "How bad is it?" "Very bad, Madam President. We're dealing with an alien force unlike anything in our records. They've destroyed 3 colonies already, and they're moving toward the core systems." "Do we know what they want?" Kane shook his head. "They don't communicate. They just attack." "Our survivors describe ships with weapons that can tear apart matter at the molecular level. Our current fleet wouldn't stand a chance against them." The president was quiet for a long moment. Kane could see her thinking, weighing options. Finally, she spoke. "Admiral, I'm declaring a state of total war. I want every shipyard, every resource, every person mobilized. We're going to build the largest fleet in human history. Madam President, even if we could build such a fleet, we don't have weapons that can match theirs. Then we'll have to find a way. Dr. Bennett's team has been studying the wreckage from Titan's Rest. They think they can reverse engineer the alien technology. It's our only chance." Kane nodded. He had worked with Dr. Bennett before. The man was brilliant, but even he couldn't work miracles. "What about the colonies? People are going to panic. We'll evacuate what we can, but our priority has to be building this fleet. If we don't stop them at their source, there won't be any colonies left to save." The connection ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts. Around him, the command center continued its work, but everything felt different now. The comfortable routine of managing human space was gone, replaced by the desperate urgency of survival. Over the next few hours, more reports came in. The aliens called themselves the Vorthek, according to the few survivors who had heard their transmissions. They had destroyed everything in their path, leaving dead worlds behind. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, their ships enormous and powerful. Kane walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were sleeping in their beds, unaware that their entire civilization was under threat. He thought about his own family on Earth. His daughter, who was just starting university, his wife, who worked as a teacher. The door behind him opened. Torres entered, carrying a data pad. "Sir, we've received the preliminary reports from the survivor. Interviews, the Vorthek fleet numbers in the thousands. Each ship is heavily armed and shielded. They don't seem to take casualties." Kane took the pad and read through the reports. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had never faced an enemy with such overwhelming technological superiority. Every battle had been a massacre, every defense easily swept aside. "There's something else, sir," Torres said. "The survivors all report the same thing. The Vorthak. Ships don't land on planets. They destroy them from orbit and move on. They don't seem interested in occupation or resources. They just want everything dead." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. An enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, that wanted nothing but destruction. How do you fight something like that? He looked out at the stars again, but now they seemed cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak were coming, and humanity had to find a way to stop them, or everything they had built would be lost forever. The war for humanity's survival had begun. Dr. Alex Reed stared at the twisted metal in front of her, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air in the laboratory. The piece of wreckage had come from a Vorthak ship that crashed on Titan's Rest, and it defied everything she knew about physics. The metal seemed to shift and flow even though it was solid, and her instruments gave readings that should have been impossible. "Computer, run analysis sequence 47, she said. Not taking her eyes off the sample, the lab's artificial intelligence responded in its calm voice. "Analysis complete. The material continues to exhibit quantum phase variance. Energy patterns suggest the atoms exist in multiple states simultaneously." Reed rubbed her temples. She had been working for 6 months straight, trying to understand Vorthak technology. The government had given her unlimited resources and a team of the best scientists in human space, but progress was slow. Every breakthrough led to 10 new questions. Behind her, the lab door opened. Dr. Marcus Webb entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and looking as tired as she felt. "Any luck with the weapon fragments?" "Maybe," Reed said, pointing to another table covered with damaged components. "I think I understand how their energy beams work. They don't just destroy matter, they convince it to stop existing." Webb nearly dropped his coffee. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought too, but look at this." Reed activated a holographic display showing the weapon's internal structure. The energy beam doesn't heat or vaporize the target. It changes the quantum state of the atoms, making them phase out of our reality. It's like they're erasing things from existence. Webb studied the display, his face growing pale. "Can we build something like this?" "Not exactly. But I think we can create a weapon that disrupts their quantum fields. If we can destabilize their ship's phase variance, their own technology might work against them." Across the solar system, the greatest construction project in human history was taking shape. Every asteroid mine, every orbital factory, every shipyard worked around the clock. The plan was ambitious beyond anything attempted before. Build 900,000 ships in 18 months. Commander Beth Reynolds walked through the construction yards above Mars, watching thousands of workers in pressure suits assemble the hull of a new battleship. The ship was massive, larger than anything humanity had built before, but it was just one of many. Through the viewport she could see dozens of similar vessels in various stages of construction. "Commander," her aide sighed, approaching with a data pad. "The latest production reports." Reynolds took the pad and scanned the numbers. They were building ships faster than ever before, but it still wasn't fast enough. The Vorthak had destroyed 2 more colonies while they worked, and intelligence suggested they were massing for a major assault. "What about the new recruits?" she asked. "Training is going well, but we're asking a lot of them. Most of these kids have never been in space before, let alone combat." Reynolds nodded grimly. The average age of their new recruits was 19. They were taking children and turning them into soldiers because they had no choice. The Vorthak had forced humanity into a corner, and desperate times called for desperate measures. In the training facilities on Europa, Lieutenant Ray Foster ran through combat simulations with his squadron. The holographic enemies moved with the speed and precision of real Vorthak fighters, and the exercise was brutal. Half his pilots had been shot down in the first 10 minutes. "Reset the simulation," Foster ordered. Again. His squadron groaned, but they reset their positions. Foster knew they were tired, but they had to be better. The real enemy wouldn't give them second chances. The simulation began again. This time, Foster's pilots moved with more coordination. They had learned to work together, to cover each other's weaknesses. When the Vorthak fighters attacked, humanity's ships responded as one unit. The battle was still difficult, but they performed better. Foster watched his pilots improve with each run, their fear gradually replaced by competence. These young people were learning to fight for their species' survival. "Sir," one of the pilots said after the simulation ended, "do you really think we can beat them?" Foster looked at the young woman's face, seeing the fear and hope in her eyes. She was barely 18, fresh from a farming colony that no longer existed. "We have to try," he said. "And we have something they don't?" "What's that?" "We're fighting for our homes." "They're just fighting because they can." Back in the research labs, Reed finally made the breakthrough she needed. By combining human quantum technology with insights from Vorthak weapons, she created something new. The weapon couldn't erase matter like the alien beams, but it could disrupt the quantum fields that made Vorthak technology work. "It's not perfect," she explained to Admiral Kane during a secure video conference, "but it should be able to damage their ships. Maybe even bring down their shields." Kane nodded from his position aboard the flagship. The massive vessel was the first of the new fleet, equipped with the latest human technology and armed with Reed's experimental weapons. "How long until we can equip the entire fleet?" 2 months. "Maybe less if we push the factories to their limits." "Do it. We're almost ready to launch." As the months passed, the scope of humanity's mobilization became clear. Entire planets had been converted into military production centers. Families were separated as millions of people enlisted or were drafted into service. The civilian economy collapsed as everything was redirected toward the war effort, but the fleet grew. Ship after ship rolled out of the construction yards, each one carrying the hopes of humanity. The vessels were not just weapons, but symbols of what the human race could accomplish when it worked together. Foster, now promoted to squadron leader, walked through the hangar bay of his new ship. The fighters were sleek and deadly, built with the best technology humanity could produce. His pilots had trained for over a year, and they were ready. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving launch orders." "The fleet is moving out?" Foster looked around the hangar at his young pilots, many of whom had never seen their homeworlds again. They were scared, but they were also determined. They knew what was at stake. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane," the announcement echoed through the fleet. "Today we begin our journey to the Vorthak homeworld. We carry with us the hopes of every human being. We go not as conquerors, but as protectors. We go to ensure that humanity has a future." The massive fleet began to move, 900,000 ships of all sizes forming into attack formations. It was the largest military force in human history, created through sacrifice and determination. But even as they departed, everyone knew they were heading into the unknown, to face an enemy that had never been defeated. Reed watched from her lab as the fleet disappeared into hyperspace. Her weapons were aboard those ships, untested in real combat. She had done everything she could. But now it was up to the crews to use what she had given them. The die was cast. Humanity's greatest gamble had begun. The hyperspace tunnel stretched endlessly in all directions, a swirling vortex of blue and white energy that hurt to look at directly. Captain Luna Martinez stood in the observation lounge of her reconnaissance ship, watching the hypnotic patterns flow past the reinforced windows. They had been traveling for 2 months now, and the journey was taking its toll on everyone. "Captain," her first officer said, entering the lounge, "we're approaching the first waypoint. Orders from the Admiral are to drop out of hyperspace and conduct a sensor sweep." Martinez nodded and followed him to the bridge. Her ship was one of 50 scouts leading the main fleet, their job to watch for Vorthak patrols and map the enemy's defenses. It was dangerous work, but someone had to do it. "All stations, prepare to drop out of hyperspace," she ordered. The ship shuddered as it returned to normal space. Outside, the stars appeared as points of light instead of streaming lines. They were now in the outer regions of Vorthak territory, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. "Sensors are picking up something," the tactical officer reported. 3 ships, bearing 27 Mark IV. They're moving to intercept." Martinez felt her pulse quicken. "Vorthak?" "Confirmed. They match the profiles from our database." The enemy ships were smaller than the massive vessels that had destroyed the colonies, but they were still larger than anything in the human fleet. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports that glowed with ominous energy. "Signal." "The fleet," Martinez ordered. "We have contact." The first battle in Vorthak space lasted only minutes. The enemy ships were fast and well-armed, but they were outnumbered. Reed's new weapons worked better than expected, disrupting the alien shields and allowing human missiles to find their targets, but the victory came at a cost. 7 human ships were destroyed, their crews vaporized by Vorthak energy beams. It was a reminder that even with their new technology, humanity was still outgunned. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak ship. It's badly damaged but still functional." Martinez studied the alien vessel on her screen. Part of its hull was torn away, and atmosphere was venting into space. "What kind of transmission?" "It's not directed at us. They're sending a message to something else. Dr. Cross is trying to translate it." Dr. Emma Cross was the fleet's best linguist, assigned to Martinez's ship because of her expertise with alien languages. She had been studying Vorthak communications for months, slowly building a translation matrix. "Captain," Cross said, looking up from her station, "I'm getting fragments of the message. It's some kind of distress call, but not what you'd expect. They're not asking for help against us." "What do you mean?" "They're warning someone about something else. I keep seeing references to the Devourers and the Dark ships. There's also something about protecting the young ones." Martinez frowned. None of that made sense. The Vorthak were the aggressors, the ones who had attacked human colonies without provocation. What could they possibly be afraid of? As the fleet continued its journey, more encounters with Vorthak patrols revealed disturbing patterns. The enemy ships were not positioned to attack the human fleet, but rather to defend something. Their formations were protective, not aggressive. Chief Science Officer Paul Bennett aboard the flagship had been tracking anomalous sensor readings for weeks. The energy signatures he was detecting didn't match anything in the human database, and they were getting stronger as the fleet moved deeper into Vorthak space. "Admiral," Bennett said, presenting his findings to Kane, "I think there's something out there, something that's not Vorthak." Kane studied the sensor data. The readings showed massive energy distortions in the space beyond the Vorthak homeworld, areas where sensors couldn't penetrate. "What kind of something?" "I don't know. The energy patterns are unlike anything we've seen. They're not natural, but they're not technological either. It's like space itself is being distorted." Kane dismissed the report as sensor errors caused by Vorthak jamming technology. The fleet had one mission: destroy the Vorthak homeworld before they could launch a full assault on human space. He couldn't afford to be distracted by mysterious sensor readings, but Bennett continued his analysis in secret. The energy distortions were growing stronger, and they were moving. Whatever was out there, it was alive and it was coming. Lieutenant Foster's fighter squadron had been assigned to escort duty, protecting the larger ships during their journey. The work was routine but nerve-wracking, knowing that Vorthak ships could appear at any moment. "Sir," his wingman said over the radio, "I'm picking up something on long-range sensors." "It's big." Foster checked his own instruments. The contact was at the edge of sensor range, but it was definitely there. And it was massive, larger than any ship in either fleet. "All fighters, form up on me," Foster ordered. "We're going to take a closer look." As they approached the contact, Foster's sensors began to malfunction. The readings were impossible, showing an object that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When they finally got close enough to see it visually, Foster's blood ran cold. The ship was unlike anything human or Vorthak. It was organic, covered in what looked like scales or chitin. Parts of it pulsed with a sickly green light, and Foster could swear he saw it breathing. "Command, this is Foster. We found something. It's not human, and it's not Vorthak. It's something else entirely." The flagship's response was immediate. "Return to formation immediately. Do not engage." But as Foster's squadron turned to leave, the alien ship suddenly moved. It was fast, impossibly fast, and it was heading straight for the human fleet. Martinez's reconnaissance ship was among the first to encounter the new threat. The organic vessel tore through her escort fighters like they were made of paper, its weapons unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of energy beams, it fired what looked like living creatures that burrowed into ship hulls and consumed everything inside. "All ships evasive maneuvers," Martinez ordered, but it was too late. The alien ship was already among them, its weapons turning human vessels into empty shells. The battle lasted only minutes before the creature disappeared back into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of destroyed ships and confused survivors. But the encounter had changed everything. Cross worked frantically to decode more Vorthak transmissions, driven by the growing certainty that humanity had misunderstood everything. The breakthrough came when she intercepted a communication between two Vorthak commanders. "The harvesters have found us again," the translation read. "The outer defenses have fallen. We must evacuate the breeding worlds before they consume everything." Cross stared at the translation, her mind racing. Harvesters, breeding worlds, evacuation. The pieces began to fall into place. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking, "I think we've made a terrible mistake." Martinez looked up from the damage reports. "What do you mean? The Vorthak aren't conquerors. They're refugees. They've been running from something, and now that something has found them, and us," the implications were staggering. If Cross was right, then the Vorthak hadn't attacked human colonies out of aggression. They had been desperate, fleeing from a threat that was now bearing down on both species. The human fleet approached the Vorthak homeworld. Long-range sensors detected more of the organic ships. They were everywhere, surrounding the Vorthak system like a swarm of predators. And they were feeding on something, draining energy from the very fabric of space itself. Admiral Kane stood on his bridge, watching the sensor readings with growing horror. The enemy he had come to fight was not the real threat. The real enemy was something far worse, something that consumed entire worlds and left nothing behind. The greatest fleet in human history was about to enter a battle they didn't understand, against an enemy they had never imagined. And somewhere in the darkness, ahead, ancient hunger stirred, drawn by the prospect of two new species to devour. The Vorthak homeworld hung in space like a dying ember, its surface scarred by massive craters and dark patches where cities once stood. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display with growing confusion as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. The Vorthak fleet was there, just as intelligence had predicted, but something was wrong. "Sir," the tactical officer said, "the enemy ships aren't facing us. They're positioned around the planet in a defensive sphere, but they're all pointing outward." Kane studied the formation. Every Vorthak vessel was aimed toward the dark space beyond the system, as if they were expecting an attack from the opposite direction. It made no sense. Are they trying to trick us? He asked. I don't think so, sir. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the outer system. Something big is moving out there. Before Kane could respond, the Vorthak fleet suddenly came alive. But instead of turning to face the human armada, they began firing into the darkness beyond their world. Their weapons lit up the void with brilliant flashes, but there was nothing visible for them to be shooting at. All ships, attack formation, Kane ordered. His mission was clear: destroy the Vorthak homeworld before they could launch their own assault on human space. Whatever else was happening could wait. The human fleet swept forward. 900,000 ships moving in perfect formation. The Vorthak responded, but their counterattack was weak and disorganized. Many of their ships seemed to be operating with reduced crews, and their famous quantum weapons were firing at half-power. Commander Troy Adams led his fighter squadron through the Vorthak defensive perimeter. The enemy ships barely seemed to notice them, focused as they were on the darkness beyond. Adams had expected fierce resistance, but the Vorthak were letting them pass almost unopposed. Command, this is Adams. Something's wrong here. The Vorthak are barely fighting back. Stay focused on your mission, Commander. Proceed to the planet's surface. Adams guided his fighters through the upper atmosphere, expecting to see the mighty Vorthak Empire in all its glory. Instead, he found cities that were dark and empty. The great towers that intelligence had described were crumbling ruins, and the few lights he could see were scattered and dim. Sir, one of his pilots said, I'm picking up life signs, but they're concentrated in just a few areas. Most of the planet looks abandoned. Adams felt a chill run through him. The Vorthak Empire was supposed to be vast and powerful, but what he was seeing looked like the remnants of a civilization in collapse. Meanwhile, Dr. Cross had been working frantically to decode more Vorthak transmissions. The communication channels were filled with desperate messages, and she was finally beginning to understand what they meant. Captain Martinez, she said, her voice tight with urgency. I need to speak to Admiral Kane immediately. Martinez looked up from her command station. What is it? I've been wrong about everything. The Vorthak aren't conquerors. They're refugees. And they've been running from something terrible. Before Martinez could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. On the main screen, massive shadows were moving in the darkness beyond the system. They were huge, larger than any ship humanity had ever built, and they were moving with purpose. Sir, the sensor operator said, we're detecting multiple contacts. They're the size of moons and they're alive? Kane felt his blood turn to ice. The organic ships his scouts had encountered were just the beginning. What was emerging from the darkness was something out of nightmares. Living vessels that pulsed with malevolent energy. The first harvester ship entered the system, and Kane understood why the Vorthak had been pointing their weapons outward. The creature was massive beyond comprehension, its hull covered in what looked like scales that shifted and moved. Parts of it glowed with a sickly green light, and Kane could see smaller organisms moving across its surface. All ships, new target. Kane ordered. Concentrate fire on the large organic vessel. The human fleet turned their weapons on the harvester, but their shots had little effect. The creature's hull seemed to absorb the energy, growing brighter with each hit. And then it began to feed. The harvester extended tendrils of living tissue toward the nearest human ships. When they made contact, the vessels simply dissolved, their matter consumed and converted into more of the creature's mass. The crews didn't even have time to scream. Sir, the communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship. It's a standard first contact protocol. Kane stared at the screen. The Vorthak were trying to communicate, not fight. After months of believing they were the enemy, they were actually trying to make contact. Put it through. The screen flickered and a figure appeared. It was clearly alien with gray skin and large dark eyes, but there was something unmistakably intelligent about its expression. When it spoke, the translation computer provided subtitles. Human vessels, this is War Commander Vex of the Vorthak. Defense Fleet, we know you came here to destroy us, but we face a greater threat. The harvesters have found us again. We must work together or both our species will be consumed. Kane felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Everything he had believed about this war was wrong. The Vorthak weren't monsters, they were fellow victims of something far worse. This is Admiral Kane of the human fleet. What are these harvesters? Ancient beings that consume entire worlds. They feed on life itself, leaving nothing behind. My people have been fighting them for over a century, but we are losing. The colonies we took from you were not conquest, they were evacuation sites. We were trying to save our people. Kane watched as more harvester ships entered the system. There were dozens of them, each one the size of a small moon. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding both fleets like hunters cornering their prey. Sir, his tactical officer said, the harvesters are beginning to feed on the planet itself. The energy readings are off the charts. On the main screen, Kane could see tendrils of energy flowing from the planet's surface toward the harvester ships. The surface was dying, turning gray and lifeless as the creatures drained it of everything that made it alive. Foster's fighter squadron was caught between the two fleets when the harvesters began their assault. The organic ships released smaller creatures that moved like living missiles, seeking out any ship with life aboard. Foster watched in horror as his wingman's fighter was enveloped by one of the creatures, the pilot's screams cutting off as the organism consumed everything inside. All fighters, evasive maneuvers, Foster ordered, but there was nowhere to run. The harvesters were everywhere, and they were hungry. Dr. Cross finally managed to decode the full Vorthak distress message that had been broadcasting for months. The translation made her blood run cold. The harvesters have breached the outer defenses. All remaining worlds are to be evacuated immediately. This is not a drill. The devourers have found us, and they will not stop until everything is consumed. May the ancestors forgive us for what we have done to survive. She realized now that the Vorthak attacks on human colonies hadn't been acts of aggression. They had been desperate attempts to find safe harbor for their people, fleeing from an enemy that consumed everything in its path. Captain, Cross said, we need to tell the Admiral immediately. The Vorthak aren't our enemies. They're trying to save their people from the same fate that awaits us. Martinez nodded grimly. Open a channel to the flagship. As the battle raged around them, Kane found himself facing an impossible choice. He could continue fighting the Vorthak, following his original orders and completing his mission. Or he could trust these aliens who had killed millions of humans and join forces against a threat that neither species could face alone. Another harvester ship entered the system, this one larger than the rest. It moved toward the planet with slow, deliberate purpose, extending massive feeding tendrils toward the surface. Where they touched, the land turned to dust and blew away on the solar winds. Sir, Vex's voice came through the communicator, we cannot hold them much longer. Our weapons are nearly depleted and our ships are dying. If we do not work together, everything ends here. Kane looked at the tactical display, seeing the destruction spreading across the system. The harvesters were consuming everything. Leaving behind only empty space where planets and ships had been, he made his decision. All ships, a ceasefire. Repeat, all ships stand down. We have a new enemy. The moment that would change the course of two civilizations had arrived. Humanity and the Vorthak, former enemies, were about to become allies in a fight for survival against something that threatened all life in the galaxy. The silence that followed Kane's ceasefire order was deafening. Across the human fleet, thousands of officers and crew members stared at their screens in disbelief. They had traveled across the galaxy to destroy the Vorthak, only to be told to stand down in the middle of battle. Sir, Kane's tactical officer said quietly, are you certain about this? Kane watched the harvester ships consuming the planet's surface, their feeding tendrils turning entire continents to dust. Look at those things and tell me the Vorthak are still our biggest problem. The Admiral opened a channel to the entire human fleet. This is Admiral Kane. I know this is difficult to understand, but we have been fighting the wrong enemy. The Vorthak are not our destroyers. They are fellow victims of something far worse. Today we choose survival over revenge. The response was immediate. Some ship captains acknowledged the orders, but others protested. Captain Williams of the battleship Thunder spoke for many when he said, "Sir, these aliens killed my brother at New Shanghai. How can we trust them?" "Because if we don't, we'll all be dead within the hour," Kane replied. "The harvesters don't care about our politics or our grievances. They consume everything equally." War Commander Vex appeared on the main screen again, her alien features showing what Kane had learned to recognize as gratitude. "Admiral Kane, we are honored by your decision, but we must act quickly. The harvesters are adapting to our weapons. What do you propose?" "A joint strike at the primary harvester vessel. It serves as a command node for the others. If we can destroy it, the swarm will be disrupted long enough for both our fleets to escape." Kane studied the tactical display. The primary harvester was massive, easily the size of a small moon. Its hull pulsed with organic energy and smaller. Creatures swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a cell. "Our weapons haven't been effective against them," Kane said. "Alone, no. But your quantum disruption technology combined with our phase manipulation might be enough. We must share our technical specifications immediately." The idea of sharing military technology with the Vorthak would have been unthinkable an hour ago. Now it was their only hope for survival. Dr. Reed, monitoring the battle from her laboratory ship, received the Vorthak technical data with amazement. Their technology was indeed centuries ahead of humanity's, but it was also complementary. Where human science was precise and analytical, Vorthak technology was intuitive and adaptive. "It's like they're two halves of the same whole," Reed said to her research team. "Our quantum disruption fields can destabilize their organic matrix, while their phase manipulation can bypass the harvester's defenses." Working with unprecedented urgency, Reed's team began modifying the fleet's weapons. The process required real-time coordination between human and Vorthak engineers, species that had been killing each other just hours before. Foster's fighter squadron found itself flying alongside Vorthak interceptors, their former enemies now, sharing tactical data and covering each other's retreat routes. The alien pilots were skilled, their ships moving with an elegance that human fighters couldn't match. "Human pilot Foster," a voice said in accented English over the communication channel. "This is Flight Leader Cole. We will provide cover while you modify your weapons." Foster had expected to hate the Vorthak when he finally met them in battle. Instead, he found himself impressed by their professionalism. "Acknowledged, Cole, thanks for the assist." The weapon modifications took 3 hours that felt like 3 years. During that time, the harvesters continued their feast, consuming the Vorthak homeworld piece by piece. Entire mountain ranges disappeared into their feeding tendrils, and the planet's atmosphere began to thin as the creatures drained. Even the gases around it. Captain Martinez's reconnaissance ship worked alongside a Vorthak science vessel to map the harvester swarm's patterns. The alien captain, who introduced himself as Commander Thek, shared tactical information that had been gathered over decades of fighting. "The harvesters are not just weapons," Thek explained through the translation system. "They are a form of life that exists to consume. They have been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, eating everything in their path." "How did your people first encounter them?" Martinez asked. "We were explorers like you. We found a dead galaxy every star system empty and lifeless. We thought it was a natural phenomenon until we found the harvesters sleeping in the galactic core. Our presence woke them." Martinez felt a chill run through her. "How many galaxies have they consumed? We do not know. But we have found evidence of dozens. They move slowly between galaxies, but within each one they spread like a plague." The modification process was finally complete. The combined human and Vorthak fleets had created something new, hybrid weapons that used the best of both technologies. Reed's quantum disruption fields were enhanced by Vorthak phase manipulation, creating weapons that could actually damage the harvester vessels. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. We have one chance to break through their defenses and destroy the Command ship? Human and Vorthak vessels will attack in coordinated waves. Remember, we're not just fighting for our own species anymore. The joint fleet moved forward, nearly 1 million ships working together for the first time. Human battleships flew in formation with Vorthak cruisers, their combined firepower focused on the massive Harvester command vessel. The creature responded to the attack, extending defensive tendrils toward the approaching fleet. But the new hybrid weapons cut through its defenses like knives through paper. For the first time in the battle, the Harvesters showed signs of damage. Foster led a mixed squadron of human and Vorthak fighters through the creature's defensive screen. The organic hull was thick and resistant, but their combined weapons were making progress. Target the neural clusters, Cole advised. Those points where the hull glows brightest. The fighters dove toward the creature's surface, dodging smaller organisms that tried to intercept them. Foster's targeting system locked onto one of the glowing nodes, and he fired a burst from his modified weapons. The impact caused a chain reaction that spread across the creature's hull. "It's working," Foster shouted into his communicator. "The neural network is breaking down." More fighters joined the attack, human and Vorthak pilots working together to destroy the creature's control centers. The massive harvester began to convulse, its feeding tendrils withdrawing from the dying planet. Aboard the flagship, Kane watched the tactical display with growing hope. The hybrid weapons were more effective than anyone had dared to predict. The Harvester command ship was taking massive damage, and the smaller creatures were beginning to retreat. "Sir," Vex's image appeared on his screen, "the primary vessel is losing cohesion. If we can maintain this attack for another 10 minutes, it will be destroyed." But the Harvesters weren't finished. The damaged command ship began to emit a low-frequency pulse that resonated through space itself. Other Harvester vessels responded to the call, converging on the joint fleet with renewed fury. "They're calling for reinforcements," Kane realized. "How many more of them are out there?" "Unknown," Vex replied. "But if we fail here, they will spread through both our territories until nothing remains." The battle reached its climax as dozens of Harvester ships surrounded the human and Vorthak fleets. The organic creatures were ancient and powerful, but they had never faced two species working together with such determination. Reed's weapons, enhanced by Vorthak technology, created cascading failures in the Harvester networks. Each destroyed creature weakened the others, and the command ship's neural system finally collapsed under the combined assault. The massive Harvester went dark, its feeding tendrils falling away from the ruined planet. Around it, the smaller creatures began to flee into the depths of space, their coordination broken. "The swarm is retreating," Kane announced to both fleets. "We've done it." But even as they celebrated their victory, everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Harvesters would return, probably in greater numbers. The galaxy would need defenders, and humanity and the Vorthak would need each other. 3 days later, Kane and Vex met aboard a neutral station to sign the first treaty between their species. The document established the human Vorthak defense alliance and outlined plans for shared technology and mutual protection. "Your people will not forgive this easily," Vex said as they signed the agreement. "We destroyed many of your worlds." Kane nodded grimly. "And my people came here to destroy yours. But we both learned something important. Sometimes survival requires forgiveness." The treaty signing was broadcast to both species, marking the end of their brief war and the beginning of a new partnership. The Harvesters had been driven back, but they would return. When they did, they would face not one species but two, standing together against the darkness. Foster returned to his ship to find a message waiting from his sister's children on Earth. They had been evacuated when the Vorthak first attacked, but they were alive and safe. For the first time in months, he smiled. The 900,000 ships that had come to destroy an enemy instead became the foundation of the greatest alliance in galactic history. Humanity had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together with those who share the same fight for survival. In the years that followed, human and Vorthak colonies would be built side by side. Their children would grow up together, learning each other's languages and sharing each other's dreams. The harvesters would return, as everyone knew they would, but they would find a galaxy united and ready to fight. The war that began with misunderstanding had ended with hope, and in the vast darkness between the stars, that hope would prove to be humanity's greatest weapon.